Hey, it's Kyle Sexton. I hope your week is off to a great start. I'm super excited to share with you something we've been working on for several months. It's an interview with Mick Fleming, the past CEO of ACCE. If you've ever met Mick, you know that he is a very thoughtful, feeling, caring collector of stories. I've always loved that about Mick. Mick's given me many, many great opportunities in my career. He's helped me buy into the servant leadership style that he promotes and that he models so well. I just love Mick. And I invited him to an interview to talk about chamber executive transitions. And he said something really cool. He said it's one thing to have passion for the job, but it's another thing entirely to have patience for the work. So without further ado, here's Mick Fleming in an interview about chamber executive transitions. I hope you enjoy.
The problem is, one of my questions is, how long can you be effective as a lame duck? And to me, that's a big question. I thought I'd start with two failures, though, because they'll tell people what not to do. And I've got the do's and don'ts all over, but these are a couple of good stories so that people know that it's not just going to be a here's the 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're done.
Mick, it's so great to talk to you about what does it look like to move on from the chamber? And lots of people have done it, but some people have done it poorly. One of the things I've always appreciated about you is that you collect stories of successes and failures balanced. I was wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about what are some of the things that you've noticed that maybe didn't go as well as they should have.
Well, there's a few things I guess I'd like to talk about. Thanks for having me on. And one of those things is the role of the outgoing CEO and their definition of a short or long runway is different than the outgoing CEO, and everybody's got different views on how that should be handled. But most of the time, the search committee and executive committee and a headhunter, if they have one, will usually demur to the outgoing CEO on what the hell do I do now? What the hell does the organization do now? So that's one that gets messy. I might as well tell you a funny story. It's sad, but a big business organization in Connecticut was trying to replace a guy that was going to be phased out at the time that they end up with a new hire. They didn't want to rush the hiring, but they got at it right away. And so as I would go to these meetings, they kept saying, we're working on that frank financial legacy and what has been going on and why were they struggling and everything like that. And, I heard the word that there was a loan out to the organization for $100,000 and they were losing money. One of the things they wanted was to get somebody who knew how to sell and who could find good representatives for the organization, and he did. And so the CEO was trying to help. And so what happened was I kept stressing, and I got asked to be essentially the liaison between a headhunter and the chamber board because they didn't speak nonprofit hiring. I mean, they may have been on a board where they just had to rubber stamp something, but these were big time corporate leaders. I guess I should say that Charlie at the search firm got a notice. They got all the people together. They got 3 days of in-person interviews with 3 people, so separated, and dinner with each of them and all that kind of thing. I knew about this problem with the finance, and I told the woman that was recommended for the job and eventually got the job. She called me frequently and asked, is this going to work? And I said, well, they're really rich. They could because they could write a check for whatever you need, but I'm not sure that their financials are in great shape. And I said, you got to get that piece of paper. And she got it, I think, from the outgoing CEO, and it wasn't very accurate. She came to work on a Monday, traveling across the country. She gets there and looks at everything and works there for a day and leaves. So I would say, this is about the transparency part is extremely important for everybody. It probably means that the board wasn't aware of these problems, not completely anyway. So that's something that's part of the search process part. The personal part for people who are trying to retire, move on, make a decision to make a decision. There are a lot of people like that, it's very kind of set by a clock or a calendar that they have this idea when they're going to leave. In my view, it doesn't help a whole lot to have somebody waiting in the wings for the job to be posted for like a year and a half. And everybody knows that the CEO wants to get out, wants to retire or whatever. And I think that period, there are a whole lot of people in town or around the state that would say, that's a pretty cool job. And they know they're probably one of the 3 people in town who would even be considered. And they just keep waiting and waiting and waiting. It also, in my view, it becomes a distraction for the outgoing CEO. This constant feeling like, do I have to help? Does this person, everybody they meet is like, would this politician be a good switch into here? And this state senator be good at running the chamber? They make a lot more money. So those things about the stalling and the timing to me are important. The transparency is important. And if the outgoing boss is not completely transparent, the board members and maybe even the staff members should speak up if they're asked. Because the alternative is almost always going to be terrible. Not as terrible as the one in Connecticut, but it could be, it's not just not healthy. I have one guy in California who negotiated a 7-year contract and named his own successor. I don't know if that's a really good idea.
That's a long time.
But the transition's been fine, and that's okay. So,
wow.
I tell you, though, this is a tricky thing because of the personal part, and where the personal part and the organizational good standing and good feelings about itself, and the CEO wanting to be there, wanting to keep the passion and patience for the job.
Mm-hmm.
Those are 2 different things. I've had a couple of execs tell me, I didn't lose the passion for the work. I just lost the patience for the work. And if somebody from a big box store is watching all this stuff and getting pushed on this stuff, and the CEO or their membership people are going back to the same people back and forth like 100 times, message is the same, and eventually that hurts the likelihood for investment from larger companies. They want stability and action. They don't want to be contemplating their navel. They want to move it or project it. Mm. So that's the thing. I really think this discussion, though, is really all about, at least the first half of it is all about you, about the exec with ambitions, either ambitions to slow down or ambitions to speed up or go up or get more money. And so.
Let's talk about that inner game and what it looks like for people to for a chamber exec to move on. Why would they want to move on, or why would their board want them to move on? Like, because that's personal as well.
Oh yeah, very much so. Um, there's also the why now question.
Mm.
And I know that some people, like our hero Gary Tobin in Los Angeles, he had a time that he had figured out and why, and it had to do with both his investments and his wife's health, and eventually his health. And so, you know, there's a reason to set a timeline. I can't spend the rest of my life, this short life. I got to help the transition go on.
Mm.
There's other people who are just scrambling too much for organizational money or personal money, and they've got to make the change. So that's the when part. You know, why now? One is, you know, the chamber's in a shambles. I mean, it's just, I don't know what we're doing. I'd like to say we're eating everything we earn, but we might be eating more than we earn.
Mm-hmm.
There's this sentiment of hanging in there that so many execs, you know, they're pretty much, a lot of them are sure that there's nobody up to the job the way they could do it. And they think, you know, the staff will fall apart, you know, the community will fall apart, the social capital and regional will come apart. So some of that is very personal, but on the other hand, it's about, it's not just ego. It's about wanting to make sure that the work they've done hasn't been wasted. So I would like to ask, most of the time if somebody calls me about this, I want to ask them, could you imagine a scenario in which you don't step down? Because if that's still in your heart, maybe you're not going to, then the process will be too slow for you, for them, for everybody. So that decision about, you know, I can't, when I look forward for 3 years, do I want to be doing this anymore here? And so they have to think that question over, but not delay the answer to the question.
Mm.
That's a decision thing. And I think a lot of this stuff comes down to decision.
Yeah.
But there's two things they've got to settle themselves. I mean, you got to get kind of personal about this stuff. You know, what are their personal financials like? Can they quit?
Mm.
And can they retire early? Or do they need to stay on until they're 72? That's a question about personal finance. Then they have to decide, you know, is under the umbrella there is, you know, are either one of us going to keep working?
Mm.
Me or the spouse? Usually that would mean that some of the revenue going into the budget every year for the family is going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
There are other things like learning some of the specifics, you know, talking to somebody who's a financial advisor or even just a casual advisor sometimes can help, or even a banker can help. But the last 3 years on the job, your portfolio should have a different mix. And a lot of chamber execs think, well, I've been making a few percent every year and putting away what I should. But at the end, you can't go like that or you're going to lose a lot of money. Got to talk to somebody about what to do at the end, the almost end. So that's important because they really can miss a whole lot of opportunities if they find somebody who knows a good SEP kind of setup for a insurance plan and things like that. I mean, there's things that they can do in those last few years to get straight on what they're going to do, or even some months they've got to do it. But that end of still employed is very important. I've talked to a whole bunch of people who whine to me about IRMA. You know what IRMA is?
Yeah.
It's a part of the IRS, and when you turn 65 and you get into Medicare, they can decide how much your premiums are going to be based on a 3-year look back. And that will determine whether or not your premiums for Medicare are high or low. I went through all that because, you know, I had a good job with good compensation, and we didn't know about IRMA. And we eventually had to go through appeals and say it was a, you know, life-changing event and all this kind of stuff. And so talking to somebody about how that's played out is important, because otherwise you could end up finding out how unfree Medicare is.
At a stage where it's too late, right?
And I think the other thing is to talk to some people who have recently retired. Preferably, I would say they should do it with somebody who's in another town, even another part of the country, if you want. Because my thinking is that everybody doesn't have one best friend, they have two best friends, which means that no secret that comes in is going to stay a secret. So you can do that with somebody who's out from out of town that you know or trust, or it doesn't even have to be a chamber person, just somebody who's gone through these last years, and get that in place. And then locally, you can find just one or two people that you feel comfortable with to float the vague idea of departure someday. I may hang it up one of these years. They have to do it without, sounding like they're firing themselves. So those are big things. Another thing they've got to do is, before anybody tries to move on this stuff, you got to look at your employment agreement or your letter of intent, and these things. Engagement letters are vague, and a contract isn't. But most people have either vague or they have a handshake agreement on what's going to happen, and we'll give you the money every year if we feel like you're doing enough for us. And they might have a 6-month bailout clause or something in either of those tools for guaranteeing some life. But man, it's hard. I think one of the other thing I recommend is to be overly visible. A lot of execs, when they get to the end of the line or near the end of the line, they kind of hibernate and they have their own clique, sort of the current and past true believers, and they need to broaden their connection outside.
That's interesting, Mick. I've also experienced that. I've seen a lot of that kind of hibernation, or staying with the network that got you there. That's interesting advice. That surprises me a little bit. What is it about increasing our visibility toward the end of our chamber career, or probably association management as well, that is helpful?
I think it's important because one of the things is camouflage, I guess. If you're out there seeing everybody and you don't talk about retiring, you just go out and do your regular chamber conversation or increase somebody's dues or whatever. And that way, that helps kind of put people's mind at ease a little bit. Yeah, we are planning for the fall festival. And we are going to take our plane or bus trip to Washington or whatever. So drive that along. And the community. I think politicians have to, because let's face it, a whole lot of politicians would not mind being the chamber exec.
Yeah, we've seen that over and over again, right? That's interesting. That's an interesting point. So you're talking about visibility as a means of advertising. I've always said that advertising is a way to tell, is a promise that you make that you're going to be around tomorrow. And so you're talking about using your chamber exec who has identified that maybe there's a sunset on the horizon for them, to increase their visibility, to also improve upon the promise that their organization's making in the community.
Exactly. And you and I both know that the chambers are not especially good at marketing themselves.
Yeah.
They're timid. They're too, I don't know. There's this feeling sort of that, I'll ask for money, but I don't really deserve it. Kind of, it's not said, it's just there.
Yeah.
And the messages get stale,
I sometimes wonder if it's the staleness is something that I relate to. I sometimes wonder if it's a thing that they talk about in the radio industry as radio burn. I've said these things 100 times a day to my team, to my board, to myself, and I feel like I'm tired of saying them, but I've never actually said them to our members. And so they get a little bit of message fatigue, even though before they've even started, because in their mind, they've said it a million times and they're tired of it.
Absolutely. There's a good Richard Nixon story about that. One time he came into the communications, the press group on his staff in the West Wing, and the guys who were writing speeches and so forth. And he stops at one desk and says, "Remember to put that tax success we had last year into one of your reports. Don't let it go away. Make sure, remind everybody that it's going to happen." And one of the people closest to where he was standing kind of like that. And, again, we've pounded this thing. And the president says, "Well, just when you think you will throw up, if you have to put in that tax credit one more time, you're going to die." That is the first time that most people have seen it. And if people remember that toward the end of their career, it's great. Because that's, to go. The other thing is that there has to be some kind of self-evaluation, I think, near the end of, and actually leading into the new balls.
Yeah.
And one of those things is to do something like, if not a SWOT exercise, something like that says, how are we doing? And I usually make them, if I'm doing a retreat type thing for a board about this topic, I make them get very down in the weeds and find the things that are absolutely the most important things you do. And then, are you doing well on the ones you should be doing well with? Are you retaining members that are the members that you should keep? If there's a good CPA firm and you've had them on a membership for a long time and they decide they don't want to pay anymore, then that's losing one that you should have not lost. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is a better measurement or temperature taking than it is to see if we can get new members, or that we're losing members that are moving out of town or whatever. The retention rate is really about, it should be two. One, we lost somebody we shouldn't. Two, we lost all these other people. And so, because most chambers will have somebody pound on the door of the same person who's turned you down for 4 years, or who's late with their dues every single year, and they spend tons of time on them. And they're probably a mid-level investor, not at one of the big shots, not at the trustees at the table, just regular member. And they shouldn't lose those. That's a thing that ends up snowballing when a new boss comes in. And your legacy will be spoiled if you're in that situation.
Wow. You talk a little bit about transparency for the organization, but do you think a chamber exec who's been there some amount of time, has the ability to objectively observe and note the weaknesses of the chamber?
Not without professional help. I think they will either damn the staff for something they never do or never do right, or it was not a perfect conference or whatever. Mm-hmm. And this will be the first time the boss, I think about the board meetings that I leave, at the end of the board meeting, and walking out the door, and there's Sally. She's been a very effective leader, and people come by and tap her on the shoulder. "Good job, Teresa." And they do that routinely. But I'm like, that's what they really feel? Do they think that she undersells herself? Gotta get the truth somehow back to the exec, but the exec has to guide it. I mean, unless you got a chairman who really gets it, I think they need to do an evaluation. There are other kinds, and that's SWOT's just kind of taken for granted as one of the good ones, and it is good.
Yeah.
But I like to do those things that are a little different. I think you've seen some of my slide presentations before, so you get that. Okay, here I go. I'm going to give you the pre-game do's and don'ts.
Love it.
Okay, that'll be for this session, I think, for at least part one of part one. So the pregame do's and don'ts, starting with the don'ts. Don't surprise your family with the news that you're leaving or have just set a date that you're leaving. Got to talk it through with family because it might involve a move, it might involve who knows what. Don't quit or threaten to quit or whatever if a major initiative is about to go through.
Mm.
You've been working on a workers' comp legislative change or a building to get through all the permit crises and some funding, and that don't do that.
Mm.
You don't want to get angry or resentful because that's you can't whine your way back into a job that somebody wants you to leave, and you can't psych yourself up that much. So don't even be resentful about yourself. Disappointment, fear, those are okay. It's just part of life. Leave the door open for a sweeter deal. I really think that's kind of cheating. It's a bidding war then. If somebody came along after you decided to leave and offer you a job, I can't tell you shouldn't take it. But it's again, it's one of those legacy things. People think, hey, somebody offered him extra $100,000, so he left us forever, mid-sized chain. So, and then big one, don't promise a friend, a strong staff member, or a politician that they'll get a shot and get an interview.
That's
The Denver Chamber went through this because there were a whole bunch of finalists for the job in Denver. And there was pretty serious kind of campaigning sort of for it. The press put on the front page, the picture of all the people who were finalists. And one of those people was the chief of staff for the mayor. And so it got out there that like the CEO, it might be the mayor's person. And here's the other problem. Two of the other folks that were in the running were doing the government relations work for the chamber. So they were lobbying somebody who might be their boss.
Wow.
So that's another confidentiality thing, but also about, promising somebody that they're going to, and I've seen places where people came out and said, oh, Senator, you're definitely the person who should get the job. Or the head of a local bank, you're definitely the kind of guy we want. And maybe it's somebody who's running a giant food corporation or something. And, she wants a shot at it. And you say, yeah, I'm sure you're the kind of person they'll interview. No, they're not. So, okay, pregame dues.
Yeah.
Draft your own reference letter for yourself and for the chair to edit and sign with minimal editing. And this could be any time in your career, by the way.
Yeah. Don't wait.
Don't wait. Write it just because, how they feel about you 4 years out is going to be different than how they feel about you 1 year out.
Have them write it every year. If you got your chair, it turns over every year, get one from every chair.
Yeah. Yep. And you should write positive references for your key staff people.
Oh,
before they know that you're leaving, just write them. They deserve it. And this will be more honest than if it is done as part of an annual rehab.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah. I think it's just a great thing. It says a lot about you as a leader. So
for sure.
Communicate with a consulting firm. Don't communicate with a consulting firm you admire about a job. If somebody thinks they're going to keep working, then they should probably, and they're thinking about going into business for themselves. If there's a decent one that's a fit for you already in place, you could probably do it yourself, but why? Find some nonprofit, LLC or whatever. Because if there's one already in place, it's a whole lot easier.
Mm.
And Cal, you know, starting a business and running a business, um, you know, all the startup costs, all the self-promotion costs that nobody pays you to do your own promotion. Nobody, you know, pays you to do your own accounting. And so, you know, I would suggest that if somebody's going to think about continuing to work, I'd say setting up the tiers of when people get advised that you're going to be leaving.
Mm.
You know, you're going to start with the chairman, and then you're going to go to senior staff. And after senior staff, you would want to go to the big mucks in business or in politics.
Mm.
And then the full staff, and so forth. But to mark that for your communities, that's from everywhere, but they should really have that kind of layout for how the announcement goes. Somebody will get mad at that first. And then the last of the dudes.
Quick question on that. How compressed is that? Is that within, like, I've seen with the best of intentions that these priorities of communication, that you've got an announcement to make, but given too much time, the rumor mill takes over. How expedient do we need to be with communicating this? Is this all within a 1 day period? Like, how, or is it?
I think you got 48 hours.
That's good. That's good. That's helpful.
Especially if you say to the people that have to know the most, you know, that's your senior staff and maybe some key politicians who've either hated you or loved you their whole life. Mm. And after that, because they'd get really grumpy if nobody told them.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
you know, other rank and file members, you know, they're not last, but they're almost last. Mm-hmm. I mean, surrounding chambers would be last. Surrounding communities would be last to know. The press would be the last to know. That's my thinking.
I agree with that one. Press being last, but yeah, I think that 48 hours is a really helpful piece of information to have, because if you give it too long, you lose control.
Yeah, if you give it too long, somebody's going to still feel like they were left out.
Mm.
Somebody important, and their feelings are hurt, if not their ego.
Mm-hmm.
So the last one thing I would recommend that the exec does before they leave, or even thinking about leaving, is to get the compensation comparisons from ASAE and from ACCE, so they know what the market value is out there. It'll help them discuss the thing with their staff, with their board, and it will help them understand whether or not they should go to another job. Next thing is decisions. One is there a no-brainer candidate for the job? That it's just like, of course. I did an interim chamber exec position in a town in Virginia, and they went through a lot of cash to do all these interviews with people and fly them in from other places and set other people up for either joy or disappointment, when they really, everybody around the table knew who they were going to hire. And they just felt, these were pretty larger corporations, so they're always in a kind of cover your butt position. They don't want to get blamed for something when they're in a big CEO of something. But they could have saved so much money, and the guy has worked out great. Went through some terrible financial problems that I was unfortunate enough to be the messenger on that.
Brutal.
Yeah, and these lines of credit, and sometimes those things don't even end up on a financial sheet because they haven't taken any money out yet.
Right.
And so, during that transition, somebody can just dig into that pot, but that pot was supposed to be for, a new lobby for the building, or two more marketing communications people or whatever, and the money will be gone. So just got to watch out on that. The next question for the exec leaving is, are they going to expect a lot of you? Are they going to expect a lot of the exec to guide the process, to move the process through? Or I think, they may want to see a new strategic plan. They want to see a new funding campaign. They want you to do some, personnel reviews or whatever. And, you should just know what you want to do if you're the leaving person, and just not get too far away from that. Because, if you think if it's a distraction in your life and you don't want to do it anymore, you got to know that. So that leads to another thing, is that is there that liaison position that I had in Connecticut, a good thing to think about, or some sort of a pro to guide it? Maybe a recently retired exec in another place that has gone through this, already done the retirement discussions and left, to get some of that input on what is likely to be dumped on the new exec, or on the old exec and the new exec. Sometimes this is something like these are the times that the good thing is these are the times when saying no is not so disruptive as it is in some other kind of board situations or things like that. So never fail to take a loss and turn it into a what did somebody say? Never waste a good recession. So don't, so what somebody seems might be critical. It's nice to be able to say, no, we're not gonna add another awards dinner. We already have awards lunch, and so that to make those decisions, and so somebody in between can sometimes help that cause of getting at least what they think, their impression of what the board's going to do. What are they going to ask? And then the CEO's role, the outgoing CEO's role in the whole process, is handled a lot of different ways. Sometimes the exec is like, I'm your servant. Tell me what I can do to help you get a new boss. And others are like, let me give you Jimmy. He's our finance guy, and we'll let him come over and help you with what you should do. Sometimes it's a volunteer. Might be a CPA or a labor lawyer, or who knows. But sometimes they can be helpful. But the CEO, if it's going to be all fall on the CEO to find all those assets and tools and resources, that's something that I would say executive committee and the outgoing CEO have to talk about.
As to what the role of the outgoing CEO is going to be in the early decisions.
And for how long,
Yeah.
Even and then the biggest decision here is, are you going to hire somebody yourselves, or are you going to get a professional firm? Most of the smaller chambers can't afford an exec search. But when somebody's got some resources and they're not sure if they want to spend it all on this, I always ask, well, if the incoming exec is not a good fit and screws up some relationships when they get there, it's going to cost more than the cost of a headhunter. But if you don't have the money, you don't have the money. In that case, you should probably just get somebody to coach you through it.
That's a good suggestion. I like that.
Yeah, I think just it's not what anybody. I mean, a whole lot of people have had to hire, and people on your board have had to hire lots and lots of people. But there's a difference. First, nonprofit is different. Secondly, in this business, if you have had a good run and it's time to kind of tally in your head, what's been going right, what's been going wrong. Um, I don't know. It's a very tough transition when the board, untrained in this kind of stuff, have to be the decision makers and say yay or nay to what, 50 different questions.
It seems a little unreasonable that a board should expect an outgoing chamber exec to handle a lot of work when it comes to the replacement. How realistic is it, though, that a board has a preparation plan, has a plan in place that has been dusted off in the last decade since the last time that they had to go through a search? And that's even assuming that there's never even any board members that are still on the board from the last time they did a search, right? So a lot of times they're having to start from scratch. Do you think the first step is to try to figure out how to do this internally, or is the first step to reach out to a search firm, executive search firm, just to understand what the value is there and what the deliverables are?
Well, the cost is usually pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, a third of the first year salary compensation, or 25% at least.
Mm-hmm.
So, the job's 100,000, it's going to cost 25, I guess. So, that might be the first question, but there's some things to do even before that.
Mm-hmm.
Once everybody's been advised, or everybody who should be, somebody's got to select and convince some volunteer leaders, probably 6 or 7 of them, to be on the transition committee and to be the search committee, whatever they want to talk about it.
Mm.
Those people have to be committed. They don't have to be giants. They don't have to be micro businesses. They should have some diversity.
Yeah.
And if it's not racial, cultural, then it should be age, gender, other things that make it so you're not in a cycle of rich old white guys making the decision.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think that committee has to be set up that way. There may be grouching, and if there's grouching, you can, exec can say, okay, do what you want. You're doing it wrong. Do what you want. Especially now with the demographic changing so dramatically. I don't think many chambers want to be thought of as an, old guys club.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they should really take that into account.
It's a great point.
So first thing they got to do, the exec definitely has to help on this, is to convene the first meeting and discuss, what should be going on. I think there's also those rules, some of which I've already given. Confidentiality, timeliness, the role of the outgoing CEO, the professional firm or DIY. Those are questions that have to get answered in the first meeting. Mm-hmm. Not, we'll talk about it next meeting. Otherwise, the CEO just stays involved all the way. If they do the first step, they do the first thing themselves, then everything will go a lot smoother if they can just get those early decisions done, including things about whether or not they should write another old plan. Should we diddle around with it, or just get 5 major things we want to get done in the future?
Mm-hmm.
It tells the incoming or the candidate in their final interview, they'll know what they've got to get. They know what they're going to have to do. The second meeting is still more, decision making. In the second meeting, they get to start talking about criteria and preferences. Mm-hmm. For somebody else. There, I think the outgoing exec's job is mostly to have a little black marker to just slice off some names that they really think would be terrible, and not judge those that are worthwhile and to talk about. Just, you got to use a little veto power there if you can, if you have any. And then that compensation issue, almost every time now when there's a change in leadership, it's because of two things. One is you're going to pay more to get somebody who's as good as the one you have. If you want to advance from where you were, you're probably going to have to pay a little bit more too. And if you kind of hire somebody that's available and eager and will work, basically work for pennies, they might be great. So you're going to have to figure out this thing about compensation tolerance at both ends, both sides. And, you know, if all they can afford is, you know, what, 40 grand, what somebody would make as a bartender, then going to have to delve deeper into that person, encourage the committee to dive deeper in that person's resume.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're just the only warm body left to throw at the job, you might just, in that case, you might get an interim.
No, so in the first meeting, you're talking about the timeline. You're kind of laying out the rules for the search, and the second meeting, we're talking more about preferences.
Yes.
Yeah.
Second meeting,
everybody kind of we're synchronizing around getting agreement around what we're actually looking for now that the rules have been set up.
The rules give people the opportunity to do that stuff. Like, you know, they all get to talk about the outgoing CEO.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they all get to talk about who's going to be the chair of the committee. And
love that.
Just how many times they're going to meet, how frequently will they meet, all those things come down at the first meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first meeting's probably 2 hours. Every other meeting is going to be less than one. Until the end, when they're doing interviews or when they're doing resume sorting into triage.
Yep.
And
love that.
Where you publicize the job opening really has a lot to do with how many you got to read. You know, Indeed will get you, you know, 400 applicants, and most of them end up in pile number 3. Basically, you scan and think if there's any nonprofit in their life. If they're not any, then have they ever been a boss of anything? You know, when the Constitution was first written, one of the earliest drafts, not earliest, one of the most seriously considered drafts was that no sitting United States senator could run for president.
Oh.
And the reason for that is they wanted people who were going to legislate to be legislators. And they thought it would be kind of stripping too much from the CEO to have the senators vote. But in the end, a whole lot of them knew they were going to be senators, so they voted, and they made that edit. Yeah, that's. There's another thing that I haven't put this into deep thought, but the demographic, the economic, the political, and the international influences are going to make this job extremely important and extremely difficult. But nobody right now, if they're trying to figure out who to lobby in Washington for a new bridge or something, they don't know who's going to be their friend and who's going to be their knockdown enemy. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I don't know. I give all the credit in the world to all the organizations that are doing it. And they're not all giants that have big staffs. So mid-sized organizations are handling all this and actually, you know, thriving. Mm-hmm. But there's some tough, the other thing the guide can put somebody through is the nature of the questions at interviews. Probably also, if you don't use a headhunter, you're going to have a labor lawyer or somebody that has done this kind of work. Mm-hmm. That can make sure you're not asking questions that you shouldn't. You know, sometimes it's just blatant. And that's just sad when that happens and somebody just drops a race bomb on the thing, and somebody said, I'll give you a good example. Somebody in one of these processes went through the thing in there. Somebody mentioned the Civil War, and somebody on the side of this rectangular table said, you mean the invasion of the North? And the one woman in the African-American woman just went, sit down. There are things that are just not polite or helpful, and it'll close the door on other applicants that should be considered. So you got to watch that. Unintended things, and the going off script is kind of, nobody can really control that.
Sure.
But to at least have approval from somebody that these questions are okay.
Wow.
Do you intend to get pregnant? You can't ask that,
Mm-hmm.
but somebody will. Is that biological clock ticking? I've been there. I've seen these things.
Yeah.
And
wow.
So
those are interesting. Those are interesting challenges we a lot of times don't think about in the transition from, how we're going to find a new exec. There's a can of worms at every corner if you don't set this up correctly from the beginning.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be rigid. It just has to be, I'll call it, sensitive to the factors that are weighing on people in their old jobs and your staff. And you got to have the context established.
Mm-hmm.
At the Duke immersion education program they have for senior execs, I went to that, and they had this whole discussion about when you're searching for successors, you need to throw the bait and the rod and reel into different ponds if you're the leader. And there's also these domains of leadership they talk about, and one of them is the one that deals with understanding by your staff and your board. The circumstantial, and what is the status of where you are now, and all those kinds of things. And that should lead to fishing in the right places. But contextual, that's the word it was, contextual leadership. So there are 6 domains of leadership. I scored 4s and 5s on a whole bunch of them. And then on the domain leadership, I was dropped off the charts down. After I realized that nobody in the office actually knew what I was doing over the first 10 years, I just saw that my eyes opened, and I said, that's the problem.
Oh.
That's the problem. They're working way too hard on things that don't matter, and it's because they don't have an idea of exactly what the board and I want.
Wow.
And my last 5 years were a lark. I mean, compared to what it was before, no fights, no big problems. There's always the usual problems, but
yeah,
wow.
Wow.
It enabled me to, I never would have been able to put together the Horizon Initiative if I had not had that awakening.
Wow.
So it's a big deal to get contextual leadership figured out. And a little briefing for the new board members on what that means.
Yeah.
Or for the search firm, search committee. That's important.
Wow. That's awesome.
Candidate acquisition is the last thing, and it's not really the CEO's job, but people who are leaving might be interested in knowing what it is that goes into whether they get hired.
Well, I tell you, Mick,
I think sort of a different thing, but
yeah, there's going to be a lot of chamber execs are interested in this topic, but I tell you, this is going to be most helpful to board members and executive committee members who want to get the right person in there and want to get this decision right the first time. I've helped a lot of staff kind of move through the process of getting an exec gig somewhere else. Lots of staff, want to become exec at some point. And I think that's really healthy. But what does it look like? What does it look like to corral the resumes of people that want to work in this organization from other communities or from your own communities? What does that look like?
Okay, with the CEO's help, the first part is to draft some kind of tentative job description. And I think that's important. You should realize if you're looking for one of these jobs, you should realize somebody's trying to do that. They're trying to get a description that's not offbeat with the context and also not wild or so ambitious that anybody look at it and go, you can't do that on $30,000. You got to get something that makes sense on that first draft. And then the exec has to step out of the rest of the discussions on value and description.
That's helpful.
Somebody's got to decide on the compensation limits. We talked about that a little bit. There's some weird things that are kind of on the tangent, but they're not really. Is that like you got to compose some kind of like sexy folder of the things that make the community and the chamber wonderful, or in great need of you, because we know you're going to be good. If you're the right person, you'll be able to kill off all these old dogs and lazy cows. So I think that package is important. The images really matter. Okay, the next thing is this question of who is going to be sent. This is your point about not getting 7,000 people and stuff. So there's a group that you can hit that are really kind of hungry to deal with these issues. One is ACCE and state association postings in both places. I think association execs do a great job running chambers, unless they were charities. If they were really if somebody was only into philanthropic, they probably are going to have trouble with this, producing all these results and stuff. So, got to compose that full, transparent economic situation of the region and successes and failures in recent years. I think Shepard's list is probably the most comprehensive, and that's probably going to get the most calls. But I'd have somebody write a letter to them saying, we're really interested. We want to hopefully get the job done from somebody who knows the region. And I think that's a really good thing. And then after state associations, I'd say the local media, they will get really ticked off if everybody except them gets the ad. And incoming exec doesn't need to press mad at them before they even put their junk drawer together in the desk. And I would also, I'm a great believer in having something written with a time limit. I think the only nonprofit person I ever knew who demanded that everybody who got to that point and want to be considered for the final to be the candidate of choice has to write a letter appropriate to the size or type of organization. And it could be invite former President Clinton to a breakfast. That means they have to know how to get the address for the president. They know those kinds of things, and they can write a letter inviting them to speak. And to ask that question tells you a whole lot about whether or not anybody did any homework, and also if they understand what they're selling. So I use that all the way down to the newest, earliest clerk. And I interviewed a guy who was just graduating from VCU, Virginia Commonwealth, and he sent a good resume in and came in, had a good interview, and did a terrible job on the writing assignment. And I had to call him and tell him, I really like you. You really got a lot of skills, but you don't know what we're doing here, and I can't hire you. And so he hung up on me immediately and then wrote an email or text to me with all kinds of errors in it to defend himself. Had another person that I hired who turned out to be, wasn't selling himself that way, but he turned out to be just a political animal. Mm. And he couldn't get the idea that the organization is setting up what's going to be the board and the government relations committee, and they're going to find out what needs to be done instead of you telling the locals what should happen. And he lasted about 2 months.
Wow.
Crashed a rental car, though. That really ticked me off.
Wow. The ultimate crash and burn.
Yeah. And speaking of crash and burns, I know you can't completely clear it, but do your best to clear out your social media accounts to get them. I know a person who almost didn't get a job because, there was a video about her in college days, and somehow they gave her the job, and she has thrived in the business since then. But it almost cost her the job because she was by far the best candidate.
Wow.
Yeah. Clean it up the best you can. Call Mr. Verizon and see what you can do. But some of it, you can't erase stuff that's in the web very easily.
Once it's on YouTube, it's good luck.
Oh, God. Yes. Okay, subcommittee then. Sometimes even just 3 people can do the triage of candidates. And if there's more than that, there are probably only 3 people whose opinion makes a difference.
Okay.
The other people are kind of go with, I never heard of this guy. I don't know what this thing is. He's from a million miles away. But there'll be probably 3 people who get it. And you don't have to be really exclusive of the others, but set some kind of a limit. You can't have the whole triage done in a board meeting. That would be deadly.
I've seen.
You've probably seen that.
It's bad. Yeah. The large. I mean, in general, the larger the group, the more chaotic and frankly, the opinions that you want and need will get drowned out by a larger group, and that's detrimental to your process.
Yes.
Or
absolutely.
God forbid, they won't even speak up in a larger room.
Well, yeah, they're going to be, we've set this thing up to be kind of a small audience because we hope a lot of people come on this podcast, but it's really, it's targeted, and it's something that you don't want to identify yourself as being somebody who's looking into this. If you're thinking about retirement and you start showing up on things, or you start, inadvertently start talking about, your retirement fund and how your pension's going to take care of you and stuff, you start to get these things out, or that they're fed up with their town, or any of those things that they might be able to get out of some anonymity. The other thing I can't, kind of the last is the onboarding, the hiring. Yeah. I mean, you've seen I've gone all through this stuff and haven't gotten to anything about how you hire somebody and onboard them. But I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on checking references until you're down to about 5 people. Because, I also like it when the reference includes at least one thing that's specific. Like I said, do they have any chance they've ever run anything? Have they, those kinds of things, to just have that be one of the reference checks that they go through. Background is important. Again, there's been a lot of stories about that. There was one guy who filled up his resume with not such truths. He didn't really get the Bronze Star. And
Wow.
so you got to do some medium deep. There are companies who do that for you.
Yeah.
Okay, then the finalist group that gets the second interview, and maybe get some of the executive committee meeting people there by then, and talk with them, maybe out to dinner, or a weekend stay. If it's a big company or it's a big job in a big community, it might be good to do a drive, what do they call a windshield tour.
Mm-hmm.
Do one of those stuff. We want to get them the right person. The right person is going to see the things you've got as good or bad, because this is the stage where you change from being the salesman and now you're the customer.
Mm.
The organization turns from being one to becoming the other. And you got to sell yourself. If people are good enough to have gotten through the stages that you went through, they're probably going to be pretty damn good. So
I've seen a lot of chambers where they have not recognized that pivot that they need to take, and they have poorly sold themselves and their community to their first choice candidate. And after all that work, and on both ends, the first choice candidate, it was an easy no.
Yeah, I think that happens. And that changeover is really, people shouldn't feel guilty about telling great stories about the community, or bashful about it. People can say these things. Mm-hmm. They live there. They know. They can talk why they live there, why their business is there. And it makes a huge difference if they get a chance to do that in the small setting, mm-hmm. Casual if possible. I actually had a guy who was a candidate for a job for me, and we went out to dinner. He was rude and ugly with the waitstaff.
Uh-oh. That's a red flag.
That's a get out of town, man. Sorry you spent all that money to get here.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was for a senior job, but I just turned me off so bad. So the setting for that final kind of second interview to get acquainted thing, look for small symbols. How do they refer to women? How do they refer to people of other cultures? How do they think do they think their staff's job is going to be to just hold his hand or her hand? You can get those kind of things in a casual conversation that you couldn't get on a piece of paper or a judge and jury type situation.
It's a great point. Yeah, it's the casual things. I used to do that when I was interviewing. My first business was out of college. I was 20 and 21 years old, and I was interviewing a lot of people. And I actually I'd figured that out via a tip from a mentor of mine. And so I'd go through my formal questions and really pretty quickly. And then I'd literally close the book on the interview and say, well, we got some extra time. Do you want to just sit and chat? And that's when the interview actually really started. And you're so right about that, because that's when I really got a good feeling for that person's capacity, what their personality is. And are they somebody that I can work with? Is somebody that I can collaborate with? Is somebody I want to be around? I mean, some of those red flag things that you described, you don't necessarily want to be around that person any longer, much less bring them through a formal interview process. But it's so helpful to know that at the right time.
I know people who have jumped from job to job, and somehow they managed to keep their truth hidden. Mm. But they were kind of like gypsies,
Oh, yeah. Wow. Those are fascinating kinds of personalities, yeah. But not one you want to bring into community leadership roles. You mentioned, bringing in the executive committee at the right stage during the second interviews, when do you bring your whole board into it, and how much of your general board members' opinions do we take into your process?
That's a good question. First of all, what is the full board's job going to be during the search process? And I think they have a job all the way through. Mostly it's listening to the report on how the committee's taking care of their tasks. And then they should mostly nod. And then if they want to talk in the parking lot, have a conversation about process, they can. During any board meeting that the topic comes up, it would be great if they could avoid being accusatory of the committee. That they aren't just looking for things the committee's doing wrong. That really hurts. It hurts the people doing it.
It's a little late for that, right?
Yeah, they get brought in. They should just be in those, like a board meeting that is having the board members listen to the report from the search committee. More and more, I think some of you'll be able to decide what's going to happen based on where they separate time after time. Is the board going to be all on with this side all the time? They're going to be, thinking that they have to do more triage to get more candidates. Don't throw out all those people. They're going to have process questions or suggestions. And I don't know if they're suggestions. Okay, now we're at the back end though, and now they've got, the executive committee, the search committee, they've pretty much made their decision. So sometimes there's a delay. So just before that final vote, I guess, the executive committee and the board can vote to have a board real vote the next day. This is another thing, that having electronic meetings count as quorum. You're going to have something that lets everybody get a chance to vote if they want to vote.
Yeah.
And maybe even be so bold as to have somebody on the staff call those directors that didn't respond. Because the walk-in, raise your hand vote has to happen quickly.
Yeah.
And there might be a good, healthy debate at the meeting just before the vote. And those are healthy. People get stuff out on the table, and but most likely people are going to agree to the recommendation.
Are you suggesting then that there's a discussion amongst the board, and then you're actually setting up the vote for the following day, even electronically?
Well, no, I don't know. I think that what you can do is have the search committee, their recommendation is going to be what passes through. They're not going to be able to, other people are not going to be able to raise other contenders. And if the board votes for that before the final raise your hand vote, if they vote that yes, that's going to be the candidate that goes through. Or if they're really stuck on two and they can't make up their mind, there'll be two. That's it. We're not going through the process again. We're not going to look farther. We're not going to look for, guy who owns the room when he walks in. We're not going to do all that. It's going to be one of these people, or it's going to be this person. And you can vote nay if you want to go back into executive committee and into the whole process again. Hiring the second choice, that the board turns around and says, no, I like Will better than I like Betty or whatever. Well, the consensus has to win. And by having that little vote ahead of time saying that this is what's going to come to the board. The last thing that I'll say is that I made two cute notes. One was about an appendix about the expenses for you and for the board as they go through this. That's appendix number 1. The there are going to be issues about departure and severance packages and all those kinds of things that are expensive.
So helpful.
And those things are good. And then for the practices of the outside possible designer and all those things might cost some money if you're trying to put together a good kit. There's all these things that happen, and you got to figure on if you're looking out of state or out of driving range, the visit will be $1,500, maybe $1,000, but
I doubt it.
It's going to be $500 each way on the flying, and then you're going to have incidentals and $400 if it's by car. Should probably allow for in your previous conversations, you should know what the moving expense can be.
Mm-hmm.
They should not overprice this and say, we'll pay all of your moving expenses. They should set a number, whether they're flying or driving.
Mm-hmm.
Cost of the search firm. So these are the expenses things for the board to think about.
Mm.
And the second thing is the list of action steps. And those I've already covered them all.
Love that.
So, but somebody who doesn't want to read and thinks they've got it all and they just want to see, okay, well, give me a checklist. They'll have a checklist.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
I love talking about this stuff, man.
These resources that you've created are going to serve folks really well. And I really appreciate, on behalf of all the people who are not going to be live with you, I really appreciate you giving so much thought and care to the chambers that you've served for so many years. And really, this is just, you've been so generous with your time, and you really do care about chambers, and it has always come through in the work that you've done and how you've hired people and how you've organized the services of yourself and the organizations that you've represented. So I really appreciate that. And I think one of my big takeaways, though, Mick, is something you said very early on in our talk today, and that was about having passion for the job and patience for the work. And I wonder if you could give me a little deeper insight into the difference.
The passion part is that sort of a belief code. I actually believe that this organization is important to the community. I'm not just running on a treadmill and, raising money to spend money and, just keeping on going on that cycle. What my job is to stay in business. If that's where they are, then they'll probably have a little more leeway on the time they can take to get out and get paid. And so then the patience thing comes to it's not just caring about or believing that the community matters and the organization matters, but that the chamber can actually do something about the economy and about the business environment that is there. So I think that's the passion part. There's some people who are so slow talking and timid that sometimes they're overlooked. They won't even, you play around a golf with somebody that you've known for a while. You play around a golf with them, and maybe the first 9 holes, all you'd hear them say is, a little windy. I mean, but then it comes to the job, when they start talking about, Leesburg, Virginia, and they're so passionate, like they'll keep you on the phone for an hour. I mean, they love what they do, and so that's the passion. But the difficulty is sometimes people are just out of gas, and somebody calls and let's say it's the state chamber calling again to tell you why you're not going to join your community and stuff. You've heard it like 16 times since you've been at the job for 7 years. And you just say, I can't do it again. I can't go to another Board of Education meeting when all they do is table every single item and want everything on the ballot so they don't have to have any responsibility. eventually you reach that point where I can't take another one of these calls. It used to work to get an escape every couple of weeks or every month. It's not working anymore. I don't have any patience for the lack of progress. So that's the difference, and it's a huge difference. Well, stay in touch with you, buddy. Really.
Back at you.
Love talking to you. Talk about having passion for the work. You have a calm but solid belief in the work and of the people who are in it, in this crazy nonprofit world.
I got it from you, Mick. Thank you for that. You helped me find it. Great leaders give meaning to the work. You helped me find the meaning in the work. That's how you carried yourself. And I thank you for it. And my clients thank you for it. They see it too. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Love you, buddy.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Love you, man.
Yeah.
Talk to you later.